Hello. In the previous introduction tutorial, we discussed about how we can create the controls on the app by using the XAML as well as the C Sharp. Now we'll be discussing about the basic layout techniques that are used while keeping in mind the alignment of the controls on the page. Let's go to the Visual Studio, our previous one app, and see now the play button is arranged as it has a vertical alignment of the top and the horizontal alignment of the left. Now if I want to place some other control along with this play button, so I have to do lot many things. If I just let go the standard way of creating the buttons, I'll end up messing up with my application layout, with the application UI. That wouldn't look nice. So for that we have two available layout elements to just place the content, place the elements at the right place inside an app. So those are a grid element and a stack panel. So let's discuss about what a stack panel element does. I'll write stack panel, and inside the stack panel I'll insert this button. Cut this button and place it inside the stack panel. Now that if I create some other button, say button 2, it would be inserted just below it even if I haven't specified the vertical and horizontal alignment of that button. So you might have got a basic idea of what a stack panel does. A stack panel arranges the elements, the child element that are contained inside it as a stack, orderly, one below the other. So as you create more and more buttons, like button 3 I'll create, it will be aligned just below the button 2, and so on. So this is how a stack panel does its work, by arranging the elements one below the other orderly. Again, you can specify the width or height as per your need. Like if you want to give the width of 200, the button would have a width of 200. But remember one thing, that each element in the stack panel would occupy one whole row. You can't utilize the available spaces, that 128 pixel here and 128 pixel here. You can't use that if you're using the stack panel to design your elements, to design the layout. So in order to be more flexible, you can use another type of layout element that is available while designing the Windows Phone app. That is known as the grid element. So let's discuss about that grid element. I'll erase it off, and as you can see, the content panel itself is a grid element. So what does a grid element does? Let's see. Grid. Inside a grid, if you put the button, you have to specify, you have to customize the settings accordingly. Like if I want to create a grid of 3 by 3, I'll have to specify the row definitions and the column definitions. Row definition and the column definition specify how much space you want to give to the rows and how much space you want to give to the columns. Like if I want 3 rows to be added inside a grid that would resemble the stack panel, I'll write grid row inside the grid dot row definitions. Row definition, height of say 200 pixels. Another row definition of height 200 pixels again, and row definition of height 300, 200. So as you can see in the designer view, we are provided with the three. We have separated our content panel area uh, by defining a grid element that has three rows. So we can utilize these three rows. We can utilize this is the same way. You can see the correspondence between this grid and the stack panel we created earlier. But in the stack panel, as you know, we can't create columns. But in the grid element, we'll see that in a moment, that how we can use the available space, uh, that is the whole space. We can insert more than one element inside a row. Right now we are able to insert only one element. Now for inserting the element in the second, for example, for inserting the element in the second row, I'll write button. By default, the first element is placed in the first row. Now if I want to play, let's say I make the element button. Now let's give it a background for easy visual aid. Now this button 2 is overlapping the button 1 element. Why is it so? Because by default the button 2 element is taking up the first row, so we have to specify explicitly which row to be taken by this element. We want the first row. First in the sense, actually it's based on the zero index behavior. Zero means the first and first means the second. It's a very regular programming practice that we see in the arrays. You might be familiar with the basic programming practices. Now if I'll create the third element, sorry, button 4 3, sorry, it will again take the first row. We have to explicitly specify, like the way just we did in creating the second button. So this is how we can create three elements, one below the other. But say if I specify the width and height of and I set the vertical and horizontal alignment top, horizontal. Now I can utilize the space that is available. I can utilize this one space available by creating the column definitions. Because unless and until you won't create the column definitions, you would not be able to insert any other element. Because row definitions are meant only for inserting one element. If you insert the second element over this, it would overlap this element. Now for the proper grid, for the proper combination of the rows and columns, you have to specify the row and column definitions. And the same way you can declare the column definitions. Now while specifying the column definition, you will specify the width, that how much width a particular column takes. I want a column to take a width of, like if I was about to create 3 columns, like in our case we'll create 3 columns, and we want each column to take 1/3 of the available space of the screen. So for creating that, I'd write star column definition. I'll copy this, I'll create 3 column definitions. Now writing star star inside all these 3 column definitions, it would mean that I want my first column to take a width of 1/3 of the available columns. Like if I have 3 columns, that means the first one would each of them would have a 1/3 share of the available space. Now if I write 2 star, that means that my first element would take the space of 2 by 4, while the other two elements would take the space of 1 by 4 available space. So let's not be partial with the first column. We'll give it width of this only, 1/3. Now that we can create some more elements. Now as you can see, by default all of these elements are placed inside the 0th index or the first column. Now if I want an element to get inserted into the second column, that means the first index 1, I'll write grid dot column equals to 1. Hello, see, this column is has been added inside the first column, the 1 column index, and since I haven't specified the row, so by default it would take the first row of the grid. If I want the second element like this to take up the second column, I write this. So let's say I want to create 2 buttons inside this and this column, this and this cell available. So that means the column is 1, and the grid dot row I'll set to 1 like this, and for the hello button write grid dot row equals to 2 and grid dot column equals to 2. Sorry, column equals to 2 and row equals to 1. So I can assume you might have got a pretty clear idea of how you can specify, how you can make a particular element to reside in a given cell by specifying the grid dot column and the grid dot row of that element. You can make that element inside that cell available. So this is how you can create, how you can use the grid element according to your ease. Now suppose if I want the next element to take up these 2 cells available in here, so how can I do that? Because every time I insert the element, it would take only 1 cell available space. So for that I need to apply the column span. If you are familiar with the HTML, the basic HTML tags, the table tag was there. Merged button. Now I want this to be placed in the grid dot column, first column, and the grid dot row, the last row, that is the second row, and I want it to have a span. I want it to span across these 2 columns, so I'll write grid dot column span equals 2. So this is how you can make the element visible in outside its boundaries, inside 2 cells. And if you want it to be available in the 3 available space, 3 cells, you can write it like this. But since we have specified the column to be first one, you have to write 0 like this. And if you want same way, you want the element to reside in the, if you want to apply the column span, I should say, a row span, sorry, you want it to display across this whole area available in here. We'll write grid dot row span equals to 2. Means it would take up the space of the 2 rows available. So why it is not displaying it? Because we have started our element to, we have specified that our element should start from the second, the last one row. So we need to change it to the first. So it will take up the space, whole space available starting from the first row and spanning it towards next one, because we have specified the column, the row span, and also the column span as well, that we have discussed later earlier also. And now this was the case we want to make the element bigger, to make the element take up the space of the rest of the cells available. What if you want to make subdivisions in a cell, like we see in the case of the this element? This element is occupying one tile, and in this one tile we have sub tiles, we have sub 4 tiles. So how we can do this type of arrangement? We can do this pretty easily by defining a grid inside a grid. Now consider the case where button 2 is defined. Button 2 is defined here. So let's remove it for a while. Instead of this button 2, I'll make a grid. Sorry. And inside this grid, I'll make this grid a 4x4 grid. Row definitions. Row definition. I want each row to occupy the half of the height available. Also, one more thing I would like to tell, since these are the empty containers, that means they aren't required to hold any value, so you can just terminate them like this also, instead of writing this. That's the standard way of XHTML we have done. So we have created 2 rows and 2 row definition, and we need to create now the column definitions. As we are making the 2 by 2 grid, we need to specify 2 column definitions and 2 row definitions. While defining the column definitions, we need to specify the width. I want both of them to share the half of the width available. Now I want this grid to be placed inside the second row and the first column. Grid dot. So we need not to specify the column, because by default it would be placed in the 0th column, and we just need to specify the row. So as you can see, inside the row we are available with these 4 elements. Now we can insert the 4 elements the same way we have. It's just a inner view, just a shorter view of what we did earlier inside this whole content panel grid. Like this. So okay, let's create rectangles. Rectangle fill, dark, yeah. The first element would take this space. Let's create 4. Now all of these 4 elements, as you might say now, would take up the first element, first one cell.
Well, it is the way it's been on the morning and not glasses. It is the way.
Obviously we need to specify the rows and the columns. So let's do that. Sorry. as you can see, these four elements are stuck to each other. They don't have any space, they don't have any voids between them. So this is not the case like you see inside the Windows Phone element. So how you can achieve this one style, if you're guessing right, we can use this, we can do the same by applying the margins that we discussed in the previous tutorial, if you have had seen that. So what's the way of writing the defining the margin is by first defining the left margin, then the top margin, comma top, comma right, comma bottom. So I want each grid to have this margin, so I'll copy it, give a space, because that's a syntax error. So you can see the way these elements are getting arranged in the design view, like this. So we studied how we can create, we studied about the two elements, the layout elements that are available in the Windows Phone API. Those are grid element and the stack panel. While stack panel only allows one element to stay in a row, the grid element allows more flexibility to you to assign, to make subdivisions inside a grid, and to merge two grids and to merge two cells according to your wish. So also, if you want to make the elements apart from each other, you can do that by the margins. So this was all about the layout thing inside the Windows Phone app. You can apply these while creating your apps. Let's discuss some more advanced thing in the upcoming tutorials. So stay tuned and subscribe the channel, and please like the video. Okay, thank you.